Well, good morning. This is part 5 and the final part of my series on scientific evidence that supports astrology. It's not going to be too long, just have a few loose ends to tie up and a couple of new things to present. So let's see if I can share my screen here. And I just need to get rid of a few panels so that I can see what I'm doing. And now we're ready to go. So I'm going to start with a little piece of evidence from the fringes of science. And I want to point out that occasionally an important idea comes along that society is not able to adequately recognize at the time. A case in point is the concept of a fractal curve, which is infinitely wiggly. We usually think of fractals as having been discovered around 1979 by the mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot. However, the mathematician Helge von Koch discovered such curves in 1904, as did Carl Weierstrass in the 1800s. But the world was not yet ready for this concept. It's not unusual that things come along, discoveries are made, but if the people are not ready for that, it just gets ignored. So here on the right, you see the famous Mandelbrot set. The boundary of this thing is infinitely wiggly. And if we zoom in on this little crevice, we get something like this. More and more twists and turns, the more we zoom in. And this area of the Mandelbrot set is often referred to as Seahorse Valley because if you zoomed in on these guys, they would look like seahorses. But as I said, Mandelbrot was not the first mathematician to construct an infinitely wiggly curve. Helge von Koch did it by starting with an equilateral triangle, and then he'd take one side and replace it with this. You go a third of the way across, then up, down, and then the remaining third. You do that for each side of this equilateral triangle. But then you do another iteration. You repeat this. So this straight line segment, well, this is what you replace it with. You go a third of the way across, up, down, and then the remaining third. Do that all the way around, and then repeat the process again and again and again ad infinitum. And eventually you wind up at this infinitely wiggly curve, a fractal curve. Likewise, Weierstrass did something similar using sine and cosine functions to make a curve infinitely wiggly. And if you zoom in on a little part down here, you see it still has all sorts of twists and turns. And the more you zoom in, the more twists and turns you find. Now, another idea whose time may not have come might be what is known as the Kolisko effect. In 1926, a woman named Lily Kolisko, who was a student of Rudolf Steiner, designed an experiment to test the associations of certain metals with particular planets. And her method involved creating 1% solutions of various metallic salts and placing filter paper in the solutions. Normally, a crystalline precipitate would appear on the filter paper, but she reasoned that this action would be blocked during the conjunctions of the related planet. Now, the images above show the results of this capillary dynamolysis. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that, but it shows the results up here using an iron solution before, during, and after a Mars-Saturn conjunction. And as the pictures show, the iron precipitate crystallization disappears during the conjunction, and that's the middle image here. And you can see it also lessening the closer you get to that conjunction, both before and after. Now, several, but not all researchers have been able to replicate Lily Kolisko's results. And while this effect definitely needs more vetting, it could provide proof of planetary effects if fully verified. Okay, now let's talk about evidence from astrologers themselves. It is said that when the Higgs boson was discovered in 2012, that it wasn't really observed directly. Instead, its discovery was the result of a preponderance of evidence that would be difficult to explain without assuming its existence. In a similar way, I would argue that we now have a preponderance of evidence from astrophysics, chronobiology, heliobiology, and statistics that can't be explained without assuming an interaction between celestial and terrestrial events. These are all things that I've covered in the previous parts of this presentation. Thus, in my opinion, the astrological hypothesis assumption, that's the assumption that there are linkages between celestial and terrestrial events. Well, I think it's been confirmed, well confirmed. All that is left is to better understand how and to what extent these celestial connections affect our lives. Statistical studies suggest that these connections sometimes work in ways that traditional astrology expects, and other times in ways that are completely unexpected. But statistics cannot tell us everything. We're at a point where science now needs to talk with those who have been studying these interactions for centuries. In other words, with astrologers. Now, scientists have long dismissed the experience of astrologers as amounting to nothing more than anecdotal evidence, but it is now time to call these experiences what they really are, case studies. And just as cultural anthropology in the past and the field of mathematics education in the present have progressed through the use of one-on-one interviews and case studies, so has astrology done the same. Scientists can tell us many things about the properties of an orange, but can never tell us what an orange tastes like. That final revelation can only come from the human brain. And it is the same with astrology. Scientific experimentation and statistics can guide us our understanding of astrology, but the final understanding requires analysis and synthesis by our own brains, the most sophisticated computers on the planet. And by the way, our brains are phenomenal. I think they always come up with the best answer, given the information that has been fed to them. When they get wrong answers, a lot of the time, it's because they have been working on wrong information or are not working with good rules of logic and scientific investigation. But when given the proper tools, brains can do a synthesis that statistics cannot so easily do. So we're at a point where astrologers not only need to pay more attention to the results of science, scientists likewise need to start listening more to astrologers. Once you accept that it's been established that there are linkages between celestial and terrestrial events, then you have to start really paying attention to the people who have been studying these linkages for centuries. Not everything astrologies or astrologers say may be correct, but there's probably a good deal of it that is. And the core of astrology, those things that have been most vetted by astrologers, I think they're actually very reliable. So here are my final conclusions and the road ahead. From the evidence shown, I can now draw the following conclusions, and this is evidence from my previous 4 videos on this topic. First, studies on sunspots may explain hard aspects. Gravitational voids called Lagrange points may explain soft aspects. These 2 things, it's not a slam dunk yet, but science has found interesting results in these areas which correspond to what astrology called hard aspects and soft aspects. So a lot of dots need to be connected before we can say that these fully explain things in astrology, but it's a start in the right direction. Okay, the third thing, small gravitational forces appear to be capable of driving larger processes, what is known as the butterfly effect. Biological life on Earth can be affected by lunisolar cycles, light, tides, and even gravity. The sun affects us in more ways than we realize, and we may even imprint certain conditions on us prior to birth. Again, statistics confirm some things astrologers believe, fails to confirm others, and also appears to reveal effects of which we were unaware. And to make additional progress, scientists and astrologers now need to work together. I often liken astrology to the practice of modern medicine. In each, there's a core set of practices that appear to work well. And what I call standard astrological theory, SAT, which includes planets, signs, houses, and aspects, and transits, I think that has been very well vetted and does indeed appear to work well. However, there are also in each beliefs that may need to be modified, discarded, or replaced as new evidence emerges, both for astrology and modern medicine. Core concepts that have been well vetted in Western astrology include the basic 10 planets, Ptolemaic aspects, signs, houses, and transits. And that's why I call standard astrological theory. Other things have perhaps been well vetted by individuals, but not yet by the entire community. And as in medicine, some current practices may be modified, discarded, or replaced as we learn more. I strongly suspect that the future of astrology lies in better understanding of harmonic, heliocentric, and mundane astrology, and that the future of physics will see new models that are vastly different from those used today. And as these new models come out, which I think will show sort of a more plastic universe than what we have today, plastic in the sense of you can modify the topology of it in various ways. Sort of like having different levels to the universe. One level where everything's separated, other levels where things are joined together mathematically, topologically. And when we get these new models, I think they will go a long way to explaining the mechanisms behind astrology. Okay, continuing. Additionally, astrology needs to reestablish the deep relationship with math and physics that it had in the past. And as history has repeatedly shown us, if it exists in mathematics, then it exists in reality. Okay, the astrological hypothesis assumption. This circle represents what I've called standard astrological theory. This circle represents modern science, and they're overlapping quite a bit at this point. So, has our hypothesis that there exist connections between celestial and terrestrial events been confirmed? Absolutely. Furthermore, as best as science can determine at this point, these connections can occur through gravity, changes in light, changing tides, changes in the sun's activity, and through other mechanisms currently unknown. Nonetheless, these connections exist in the findings of science, often overlap with those of traditional astrology. And over time, we will likely see the area of their intersection get much larger. There's much more scientific analysis and statistical analysis of astrology going on these days than in the past. The computers give us access to not only statistical software that is both free and very powerful, but also large databases of horoscopes that can be accessed for doing these studies. So, you know, astrology, the evidence is growing by leaps and bounds. Okay, well, that's my last slide. Let me end my screen sharing here. And I'm back. So this is the end of part 5 of this series on scientific studies that support astrology. If you haven't already, please check out parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I hope you join me again in the future for more videos. So long for now.